Now it's time to turn the tables and ask questions to those who cover the music industry. Please welcome our Executive Vice President and General Counsel, Danielle Aguirre, to moderate our Meet the Music Press Roundtable.
Thank you, David. It feels good to be the one asking the questions for once, and to get to know some of our favorite journalists a bit more. Following our 2019 keynote from Billboard editorial director Hannah Karp, this year we wanted to convene additional publications to discuss how they view the industry in these dynamic times. Our viewers will recognize these names, and their PR teams definitely will. Please welcome Jem Aswad from Variety, Amy Wang from Rolling Stone, and Tim Ingham from Music Business Worldwide. It's not often you have the spotlight turned on you, and we'd like to get your take on some of the biggest stories you've been covering this year. And there have been some fascinating industry trends emerging. Jem, Amy, and Tim, we're going to start with non-fungible tokens, or NFTs. You can't go anywhere on social media without seeing stories about the most recent NFT sales of music content. Artists like Kings of Leon, deadmau5, Post Malone, and others are using these tokens to sell their albums, their audiovisual content, and even artwork. What do you think of the long-term NFT potential? And is this a viable new method of distributing music? Jem, why don't we start with you?
Sure. To be honest, I have not dug that deeply into NFTs as a phenomenon on their own. But what I will say is, ever since illegal downloading made it almost impossible to make money from recorded music, anything that is going to provide another viable revenue stream, especially a lucrative one, reasonably lucrative one, for artists, for songwriters, for personalities like that is, I would say, is welcome. It also satisfies some things for fans in a lot of ways, in that streaming has made it so like you kind of want something, you know? I mean, those of us who grew up with vinyl, it's like the experience of not even having like a pile of records or a pile of CDs to go through when somebody asks you what you're listening to. You know, it's like, hey, what are you listening to? You know, so it's nice to have an object. I think it's a good thing for fans, and if it's another revenue stream for artists, great.
I couldn't agree with you more on additional revenue streams. Amy?
Yeah, I think Jem makes a good point that it's like replacing a sort of like scarcity, exclusivity element of music fans' cravings that you can't really fill with streaming. We've also heard that NFT's true potential lies not just in like collectible items and sort of like trinkets, but like what they could do to the entire system. So for instance, like in theory, NFTs could change ticketing or like get rid of bot scalpers and like sort of like solve a lot of problems. But right now, everyone is so focused on these like sort of glittery aspects of it that we won't see those like more advanced applications until the next wave.
Actually, that leads me into the next question for Tim. Are there any issues you see with the growing use of NFTs? I mean, is this a scalable way to distribute music, or is this just for collectibles?
That's an interesting question. I'm sure David Israelite is slightly off camera chewing his cheeks on that. Obviously, there are many questions on how copyright is going to be policed in the world of NFTs, and indeed how NFTs and the entire blockchain itself sort of is going to interweave with what we know as the traditional copyright system. Just to go back to a couple of the points that the guys made earlier, I think Amy's absolutely right on the scarcity point. This is a theme that I guess we'll all be coming back to, and I'll be coming back to. What NFTs say to me more than anything else is that people are willing to spend more money on things that artists make online. And it's we as an industry have been kind of stuck in the view that fans are willing to spend real money on physical items and in real life experiences. And what NFTs have shown us really for the first time is that there are ways that we can allow fans to manifest their fandom and the amount they spend in the digital world. And that's probably the most exciting thing I can think of that NFTs have sort of triggered in the mindset of the industry.
I agree with you. As long as we can resolve some of the issues around copyright and IP rights, I think you're exactly right. Jem, yeah.
It potentially cuts out the middleman because, you know, to Tim's point, people want objects, things from their artists. The more unique, the more personalized, the better. And, traditionally that's been merch, where you have a huge middleman component, unless you're selling stuff out of the van as a touring artist, which obviously has been impossible for the past 14 months. But as a way of making more revenue come directly to the artist, with whoever is executing the NFT presumably getting a cut, that's great.
So is there an NFT sale you've seen in the music space to date that's particularly interesting? Amy?
The art ones have not particularly stood out to me, because they're all like sort of similar in format. I did find the Kings of Leon one quite interesting, because it offered VIP tickets, like for life, essentially, for people who purchased one specific NFT that they were offering. So it was like you could go to a Kings of Leon show for 10 years and get like a VIP driver to like bring you backstage, like food and drink. I can't personally imagine like wanting that, but somebody out there does. So somebody out there is getting it, right? And like the idea that you could just purchase it with one go and really like have this connection to a band and also acquire something truly valuable and unique is really interesting.
Let's turn to the next topic. We have seen a gold rush in recent catalog sales. Stevie Nicks, Bob Dylan, Ryan Tedder, John Lennon and Paul Simon, just to name a few. And there's been increasing investment from private equity and venture capital interests over the last few years. Do you guys think the involvement of big investment companies in music publishing and the money to buy catalogs that comes with it is a good thing or a bad thing for our industry? Tim, why don't you take us?
Oh, good thing or bad thing? That deserves a much longer answer than that. I have the intellectual capacity to give. But what I can point out is what I think is happening increasingly because of the investment that is coming from Wall Street and from private equity into songwriting in particular, is we are going to see an increased division between the operative side of the business, the maximizing of copyright, maximizing the exploitation of copyright in terms of sync and marketing, and increasing volumes of streams and getting music placed in commercially useful areas, and just the ownership of rights. I believe those two things, which have been meshed together in the major music companies in particular, are going to be increasingly separated, and you're going to get a services class of music company, and you're going to get an ownership class of music company. And I think all of the focus, understandably, because they make great headlines for our three publications, have been on, or most of the focus has been on the ownership part, the acquisition part, the amount of money that's getting spent. But I think there is a huge opportunity coming for various players in the industry, Universal Music Group being a very obvious one because it's the largest operative music company in the world, to actually service the rights of others and do so on a global basis. And we saw something similar playing out with Downtown Strategy in the way that it just sold off its cachet of copyrights and is focusing on becoming a services-only business.
Jem, do you want to add something there? Why do you think investors are betting on the value of these classic song catalogs?
Well, I think they've been convinced. First of all, I agree with everything that Tim is saying. But they've been convinced that they're valuable. And the fact that it was already on the rise, and then the pandemic hit when the financial engine of the music industry, the live entertainment business, was just completely flattened and the value of copyrights went up. So what's not going to be affected by something like a pandemic? A copyright. So again, it's like the deals are too specific and diverse to really break it down into a good or bad. But the question is, like, now that you have these copyrights, what are you going to do with them? Okay, are you going to just sit on them, or are you going to exploit them? Obviously, to exploit them requires a staff that doesn't have a million copyrights that they have to exploit. And that's basically what Tim was getting at. You've got the ownership versus the execution, or whatever more sophisticated word he used than that was. So like, it is probably going to end up ultimately being boom times for places that administrate. and can actually work these catalogs, because a hedge fund does not know how to work a song catalog. As we saw from KKR essentially admitting that by renewing their agreement with BMG, which can do that.
Amy, you want the last word on this topic?
Oh, well, those are all great points. I think looking at like the broader landscape of like music and tech tech's investment in every global industry, you're seeing a lot of like conversation about how like whenever VC money comes in, whenever Wall Street just quote unquote comes in, things tend to be overvalued. You tend to see things that they believe are undervalued, and then they like boost them up to an extreme. And we see this like in journalism too, to give a corollary. Like what Substack is doing with journalists is like valuing tons of hundreds of thousands of dollars on individual people, because they believe that like these specific journalists have not been correctly valued with respect to their publication. So it's sort of the same thing in music catalogs too, where you see like the songwriter suddenly coming to the fore because a lot of people in tech and finance believe that is an undervalued class. And I think like as Jem and Tim noted, we're going to see like a bit of a bubble when it comes to that, and things will naturally settle and have a different landscape going forward, because this certainly can't continue for much longer.
Well, look, I mean, I think NMPA would certainly agree songwriters are an undervalued class, and we want to see them valued properly. Whether or not these recent catalog sales are the right value, I think we'll see in the next few years. Let's turn to our final topic of the day, and that is the pandemic. We've all been living in this world for the last year. The pandemic has had a profound effect on how our industry has acted and how people have consumed music. I'm sure it's also changed how you all have covered the industry in the last year. So I'm going to ask you each, what has been the biggest challenge in covering the music industry this year? Amy, why don't we start with you?
I think a lot of people at consumer magazines, which Rolling Stone is one of, believe that music was really centered on live music. So it's like concerts, like looking at like album releases and things like that. So one kind of silver lining of the pandemic for music journalism is that journalists have, without all these things to cover that are like exciting and buzzworthy and forward sort of stage facing, they've really delved into the behind the scenes of it. So we now have people who never really looked into that kind of stuff before, like trying to figure out what like a TikTok rollout strategy really means for an artist, or what an NFT is, for example, right? So we see all these really interesting, cool ideas, and they're being explored for the first time by music journalists who have taken it upon themselves to delve more deeply into that.
Tim?
I've always believed that good business reporting is good business reporting in any industry. So, whether it's the music industry or it's the sewerage industry or renewable energy industry, you kind of will get the same themes and the same energy, and a good article is a good article. Music layers on top this kind of amazing dynamism and sort of pizzazz, basically. And that is what I found most difficult personally, is what's really healthy about the music industry is the big stories have kept coming, the big deals have kept coming. I mean, there was a period there where everyone obviously took a breath and was panicked, myself and those around me included. And then, the industry picked back up, and we could once again be distracted from the mundanity of our daily lives by all of the great stuff happening in the business. However, it's just the sort of people being able to meet, rumors get flying around, deals getting done over lunches. That kind of is a big part of what brings a lot of energy to the music industry, and also the release schedule slowing down as a result of people perhaps putting off some major releases. In the background of all of the deals, that definitely has had an impact on as I say, the dynamism of what I can sense coming off the industry. So I'm looking forward to its return.
And Jem, what's been the biggest challenge for you in the past year?
Well, I would double down on what everybody is saying because I share those, so I'm not going to repeat them. The positive challenge has been seeing the way the business, the way companies, the way so many people have adapted and been charitable in many cases. Like, for example, Music Cares distributed something like $24 million to music people within a week, and stories like that are very heartening in a really down time. And also to see the way that music enriches people's lives in these times and how important it is to people. And the entire music business press and music press have done a great, great, great job. I mean, I really have to give props to absolutely everybody, present company and beyond, for the job that we've all done. Now, personally, the hardest thing has honestly been communicating with and telling the stories about the businesses, particularly independent venues that have suffered because of this. I mean, it has been absolutely heartbreaking seeing what's happening to a lot of these venues, because Live Nation and AEG are big enough to survive something like this. They have enough surplus cash, not to say that it hasn't hurt them, because it's hurt them enormously, but they're much better set up as businesses to survive something like this. Your local venues are not. And even though there's $16 billion in federal relief waiting for independent venues and theaters, as of right now, not a dime has been distributed by the Small Business Administration. That is unconscionable. So, yeah, you know, sometimes you do have to take people to task for this. I mean, I've been calling senators' offices about it, you know, and overstepping the line in journalism a little bit, quite honestly, just because I'm so outraged that they're just sitting on $16 billion and can't get it together to distribute it. So, as you can see, that is a challenge and a frustrating one.
No, look, I couldn't agree with you more. I think one of the hardest things for all of us, and I know we're all music lovers, has been not being able to go out and see live music, not being able to support our local music venues. It does open up to my last question, which is, without those venues and without live music, people have had to find a new way to listen to music during the pandemic. And so, you know, very quickly, you know, in just a few words, what would the biggest story in terms of the new way that people are listening to music during the pandemic be? Amy, what do you think?
The new way that it's not concerts. I guess live streams have kind of stepped into that role and tried as much as they can to be a concert. But what's most interesting to me is the way that people don't seem to really need them. Like you don't really want a concert substitute. What you really want is like the platform that like lets you like DM your favorite artist or text your favorite artist, or like if someone, like many people actually are making like the equivalent of like OnlyFans for music, with a different sort of twist of like, you know, an artist who is doing something and then just want like personal support from fans. So it's like, as Jem mentioned earlier, like taking out the middleman in a lot of different cases and looking at ways to connect with people that doesn't see a chunk of the royalties going to a label or a distributor or any other service other than like the artist putting something out and the fan taking it in, which is very different to a concert where you have like all these layers of like $50 in Ticketmaster fees just to like go, and then like the physical barriers of gates in front of you. So in a way, it's like sort of like brought people a little bit closer together and leveled the playing field between artist and fan, which is nice to see.
It's funny, I was reading a tweet from Dionne Warwick this morning that said, you know, people don't want to hear about the artist's background, they just want to hear the good music. And I actually think this year may have proven that wrong, because they want both, right? They want to hear more directly from their artists and songwriters, and they want to hear the good music too. Tim, what do you think in terms of, you know, new methods of distributing and consuming music this year during the pandemic?
You're almost distracting me with what you just talked about with the Dionne Warwick thing. On that point, I often talk about what would 2021 make of Nick Drake, like this reclusive individual who basically somehow managed to manifest their introverted brilliance in music, but would never have ever been comfortable in front of a camera, let alone sitting, you know, doing an Ask Me Anything or a live stream from home. Like, these artists, are they going to die away? Are they going to disappear because of this new economy? That is a worry. That being said, the economy itself is brilliant, and it is, despite this sort of deflating and depressing background of us all not being able to get out to concerts and not being able to feel that human connection again, exactly what Amy said. You know, the thirst for fans to get closer to artists via digital mediums is really exciting, and I really hope that the kind of de facto, the largest digital music platforms are really thinking about this and are hungry enough to think about how they marry what they do with that thirst of fans to get closer to artists, be that through live streaming, be that through direct interactions, because I do think that can be monetized, and I do think that there's a valuable and seismic additional layer of economy for the music industry to tap into there.
Jem, I'm just going to change it a little, and I'm going to ask you personally, is there an app or some new method of distribution that you couldn't have lived without from this last year of the pandemic? What were you doing listening to music, and how were you consuming music in this past year?
I mean, it wasn't an app. It was all the usual ways that I usually listen to music, but the difference is I'm listening to a lot more of it. And I think this is true for artists as well. The lack of travel, the lack of going out and doing things, the lack of commuting to work has given me a lot more time to focus on music. I mean, I did an article at the end of last year about binge listening because, like, I'll go through a full artist catalog, over the course of a 12-year catalog over the course of a couple of weeks because I can.
Yep.
And I do know other people who are doing that. But again, just to second what these guys are saying, I feel like the change that will come out of the pandemic is the direct connection between artist and fan. Artists without audiences to perform for, at least live audiences, had to find different ways to connect. And I don't think that those methods of connecting are going to go away. They'll change, they'll evolve into different things, but like pay for my special, live, weekly live stream while I'm not on tour. Pay for my weekly live stream so I don't have to go out on tour. I mean, things like that, innovative ways of connecting with fans have really changed music forever. And they're things that probably would have happened, but happened much more quickly because of the pandemic.
Well, it seems like a deeper connection with the songwriters and artists you love is a theme of this past year. And I do hope that it doesn't end because I think it's a really great way for artists and writers to connect with the fans that love their music. Last quick round, what do you think is the best album that was released in the past year? Amy?
Oh, no. Come back to me.
Okay.
Give me a second.
Tim? Jem?
Difficult question for me because I've used the time to delve far more into catalogue, and I think the statistics show that everyone else has been doing the same thing.
I love the Weeknd's album. I love the Avalanche's album. I love the Phoebe Bridgers album. I could list off a dozen if you would let me pick up my phone.
Amy?
I did really like the idea that someone like Taylor Swift went out and made a cabin album, and then we are all just stuck in this album, living it for the next however many months to come. And I still go outside. I'm like, oh, it's a very folklore day. What a prescient idea for her to do that, and I really respect that. I haven't even listened to the album enough times to say that it's my favorite, but it's I really like that idea that someone was able to capture a moment and speak to people in a particular year, and a particularly crucial year.
Well, it certainly felt very relevant to where we all were and what we were all feeling. So thank you all for being here today. And with that, I'll send it back to David.
Thanks, Danielle. Next, we turn the spotlight to the contributions of someone who does not work in the music industry, but who has been vital to the industry's success. Congressman Jerry Nadler has spent years listening to the needs of creators. As the chairman of the House Judiciary Committee, there is no more important lawmaker when it comes to copyright and intellectual property. Representing New York City, Jerry Nadler was instrumental in passing the Music Modernization Act in 2018. This Congress, Chairman Nadler is tackling the DMCA's outdated safe harbor provisions, which for too long have shielded online platforms from liability for infringement. Jerry Nadler is not afraid to take on tough issues, and our industry is lucky to have him as a champion and as a friend. For his years of leadership and dedication to creators' rights, we proudly present him with NMPA's President's Award.
Hello, everyone. I'm sorry we cannot all be together at this time, but I appreciate being able to speak with you in this manner. I'm honored to accept the President's Award and would like to thank the NMPA and David Israelite for presenting it to me. I have been proud to be a strong advocate for the rights of the creative community and to work with the NMPA over many years to help ensure that songwriters receive fair compensation for all of their efforts. As a representative of New York City, I have seen firsthand the important role the music industry, including songwriters and those who make the music we all cherish, plays in our city. I recognize that the creative community has been especially impacted by the COVID-19 pandemic, and I am in awe of the resilience all in the industry demonstrated during this unprecedented time. I am hopeful that we are turning a corner in this crisis and that the industry will be able to safely resume its full range of operations soon. In Congress, passing the historic Music Modernization Act was a remarkable bipartisan feat, and I am grateful that virtually all major industry stakeholders came together to support the bill. We seized on an historic opportunity to resolve long-standing inequities in the music marketplace, and because of our work together, we ensure that artists, songwriters, and other music creators receive a fair market value for their work. We all have a connection to music, and it is imperative that we value those who create it. As chairman of the House Judiciary Committee, I will continue to advocate for music creators so that you can continue to create the music we all love. Thank you again for this tremendous honor.